Hello, welcome to the Sad Crime Channel. Today I bring you a tragic case from Europe involving Kristina Joksimovic. This story is both heart-wrenching and thought-provoking. Before we dive in, I want to note that this episode may not be suitable for everyone. While I will avoid unnecessary graphic details, certain descriptions are essential to present an accurate account of what happened. If you're ready to learn more about this deeply unsettling story, stay tuned. Kristina Joksimovic was born on April 15, 1985, in Switzerland, though she had Serbian roots, which explained her unique surname. From an early age, Kristina displayed a remarkable talent for modeling. Her stunning beauty and striking figure caught the attention of those around her, who encouraged her to pursue a career in the fashion industry. By 2007, she was a finalist in the Miss Switzerland pageant, cementing her status as one of the nation's most promising beauty icons. Following her success, she began training aspiring young models, teaching them essential skills such as runway techniques. Taking her passion for mentorship a step further, Kristina founded her own coaching agency named Catwalk Coach, based in Basel. Among her notable protégés was Dominique Rinderknecht, Miss Switzerland 2013, whom Kristina helped prepare for the Miss Universe competition. Her expertise and dedication in training future talent made her a respected figure in the modeling world. Kristina also embraced digital platforms, sharing educational content through YouTube videos. Those who knew her described her as energetic, ambitious, and deeply committed to helping women build confidence. Outside of modeling, Kristina enjoyed reading, playing volleyball, and watching documentaries. She juggled multiple passions and professions, including a successful career as an IT recruiter from 2013 to 2017. During this time, she worked for high-profile companies, including Google. Kristina Joksimovic achieved tremendous success at a very young age, and her future plans were equally ambitious. Among them was getting married and starting a family. In her professional life, she met Mark Reben, a businessman 3 years older than her. Kristina felt that Mark was the one she would spend her life with. He came from a wealthy and influential family and was a handsome entrepreneur who had achieved success in building his own business. By 2022, he was the owner of a consulting firm. Together, Kristina and Mark formed a seemingly perfect couple. Initially, Kristina's family had doubts about their relationship, feeling that the two didn't complement each other. Kristina was outgoing, always smiling and cheerful, while Mark was more introverted, often critical, and sometimes seemed arrogant. However, despite these differences, the couple tied the knot in August 2017. In 2020, they welcomed their first daughter into the world, and a second daughter was born in 2021. The family lived in a large, beautiful house in Kristina's hometown of Binningen, near Basel, Switzerland. In the early years of their marriage, Mark seemed to be the ideal husband. He loved his wife more than anything and treated her like a queen. Their family life appeared to be a dream come true. They were successful in their careers, had a beautiful home, and healthy, talented children. Mark was also a deeply involved father. He even volunteered to lead a local scout group. During this time, Kristina frequently posted pictures of their family on Instagram, and even their closest friends considered their marriage to be perfect. However, in 2023, this seemingly flawless image began to crack. Kristina was 38 years old, and Mark was 41. For the first time in years, friends and family began to notice growing conflicts between the couple. On July 14, 2023, the police were called to their home following an incident of domestic violence. Later, during a conversation with a friend, Kristina mentioned that Mark had used violence and threatened her, saying that if she called the police, she would see what would happen to her. Kristina was terrified, but despite the threats, she called the authorities. Gradually, The truth about what was happening behind closed doors began to emerge. Mark was very different from the image of the perfect partner that he had worked so hard to create. Despite this, Kristina continued to post pictures on social media of trips and family moments, suggesting that everything was fine. On Instagram, there were pictures from what seemed like an ideal romantic getaway for the couple by Lake of the Four Cantons. Kristina and Mark appeared to be deeply in love, but the reality was far different. On the way there, Mark told Kristina that he was looking forward to arguing so he could return home to their daughters. Later, during dinner, Mark became rude and started insulting other couples in the hotel. When Kristina asked him to stop because it was embarrassing, he stood up, told her that she wouldn't tell him what to say, and left her alone in the hotel. These types of situations were becoming more frequent, but Kristina kept most of them a secret from her loved ones. In February 2024, Kristina's parents were unable to reach her for several days and began to worry. Kristina had always been very close to her family, and they stayed in constant contact, so it was very unusual for her to go silent like this. Soon after, Kristina's father received a call from the preschool attended by his grandchildren, informing him that Kristina had not picked them up. He immediately contacted Mark, who told him that he, too, had lost contact with Kristina some time ago. Mark added that his wife had, from time to time, disappeared without a word, simply leaving the house without saying where she was going or when she would return. He believed this was just another instance of her disappearing for a while. Kristina's father decided to pick up his grandchildren himself. He drove them home, tucked them into bed, and began searching the house for any signs that might indicate where his daughter was. He found nothing and decided to be patient, hoping that Kristina just needed some time to sort out her personal matters and would return soon, safe and sound. As the days passed, there was still no contact with her. Kristina's parents, increasingly concerned, decided to visit the house that Kristina shared with Mark again and search for any clues. By this point, they had a very bad feeling and could no longer wait idly. What was also frustrating to them was Mark's apparent indifference. He seemed too calm, given the circumstances. He hadn't been in touch with Kristina for several days, but it didn't seem to worry him. He was taking care of their daughters and insisted that these kinds of disappearances were nothing unusual for Kristina. But Kristina's family knew this wasn't true. They were in regular contact with her, and this situation had never occurred before. On February 13th, 2024, Kristina's father went to the house once again. He spent a few hours there, having lunch with his grandchildren and son-in-law, who continued to claim he had no idea where his wife was. Before leaving, Kristina's father decided to check the shed near the house. There, he found a bag of trash in the corner. Driven by a feeling of unease, he decided to check its contents. At first glance, he noticed blonde hair. When Kristina's father looked into the bag, he was horrified to discover that it contained the head of his beloved daughter. Terrified, he screamed and rushed out of the shed into the middle of the street. He stopped the first car that passed by and immediately called the police. Nothing could have prepared the arriving officers for what they were about to encounter. It was clear that Kristina Joksimovic had been murdered. The circumstances surrounding her death, as well as the attempt to dispose of her remains, were even more shocking than anything they had previously encountered in their careers. Due to the dismemberment of the body and the condition in which the remains were found, the investigation was challenging. However, it was determined that Kristina had been strangled before her body was cut into pieces using 3 different tools: a knife, a saw, and garden shears. One of the most disturbing details of the case involved the fact that some of the victim's body parts were blended in a blender, and the perpetrator attempted to dispose of the remains by dissolving them in acid. Signs of trauma were visible on the body, including injuries inflicted before Kristina's death. She had a wound on her cheek under her eyebrow and nose, as well as several bruises on her right thigh. Her head had been severely damaged, and parts of her hair had been torn out. Before the body was dismembered, the hip joints were dislocated and bones were removed from the skeleton. Similarly, the left arm, forearm, and the lower part of the right leg were treated in the same manner. After cutting off the limbs, the perpetrator removed the victim's uterus with almost surgical precision. This behavior was considered indicative of a potential mental disorder in the perpetrator, and it could also point to a fixation on or hatred of women. Naturally, suspicion immediately fell on the victim's husband. Mark's behavior since his wife's disappearance had been very suspicious. When he was arrested and led out of the house, he turned to his father-in-law and said that if the man hadn't spent so much time at his house and had left sooner, the discovery would never have been made and everyone would have been better off. During the arrest, Mark showed no emotion. When he was taken in for questioning, the detectives quickly pressured him and he almost immediately admitted to treating Kristina's body in such a brutal way. He claimed that a few days before he had come home from work and found his wife unconscious, lying at the bottom of the stairs. When he realized she was dead, he panicked. He said he was unable to explain to the police that he wasn't the one who had done it, so he decided to dispose of the evidence and stage her disappearance. However, this version of events seemed highly implausible from the very beginning. The fact that someone might try to dispose of evidence out of fear of wrongful accusation is not uncommon. That said, in this case, it is very hard to believe that a loving husband, upon finding his wife after an accident, would treat her body in such a way. Moreover, the findings of the forensic pathologist contradicted the husband's version of events. According to the medical expert, the 38-year-old woman died as a result of strangulation. When the suspect learned of the overwhelming evidence the investigators had, he changed his story. He claimed that he had indeed taken his wife's life, but he did so in self-defense. According to him, an intense argument had broken out between them, and at one point Kristina had attacked him with a knife. He said that if he hadn't stopped her, he would have lost his life instead. He later explained his actions by saying that he was in shock, had a muddled mind, and, driven by emotions, started doing whatever came to mind with the body without thinking logically. Still, the facts didn't support his version of events. For example, the blender he used to dismember the body had been purchased shortly before the crime. He claimed it was bought for his scout group, which he led, but a more logical explanation was that he had been planning to take his wife's life for some time, and had already considered how he would dispose of her remains. News of the murder shocked the country. During the investigation, many details of the case were not made public. For several months, the identity of the perpetrator was kept secret, and in official circles the name Thomas was used. After reviewing Mark's phone, it was discovered that while he was trying to erase the traces of his crime, he was watching videos on YouTube. This behavior was not typical for someone who was allegedly in shock or on the verge of a breakdown, as he tried to portray. It appeared instead that he was trying to pass the time while thoroughly destroying the body of the woman who had once loved him and given him 2 children. Mark underwent a psychiatric examination, which revealed that he exhibited sadistic and sociopathic traits. Experts stated that he showed a low capacity for empathy and emotional intelligence. He was capable of acting with cold blood and exhibited many characteristics common among criminals, such as a low tolerance for frustration and a lack of impulse control. It was concluded that since Mark was capable of doing such things to a woman he had claimed to love for years, he posed a threat to everyone around him, and even his own children were not safe. The prosecution also emphasized that the methods he chose to carry out the crime and the tools he decided to use revealed the truth about his mental state. His actions appeared calculated, perhaps even overly complicated, and indicated premeditation. The prosecution argued that this also pointed to the deep hatred he must have had for his wife, especially since the methods employed required many hours of effort and physical exertion. Undoubtedly, in this case, the perpetrator had to be devoid of emotions and show sociopathic tendencies. Investigators also looked into the police report from the intervention at Kristina and Mark's house that took place a few months before the murder. It was during this incident that Mark had started to choke his wife. Kristina also testified that after grabbing her by the neck, he slammed her head against the wall. A former partner of Mark was also called as a witness. The woman admitted that Mark had repeatedly used violence against her. She claimed to have only freed herself from him in April 2016, just over a year before his wedding to Kristina. The woman testified that during one of Mark's violent outbursts, he ran over her foot with his car and later threatened to throw her out of the moving vehicle. On another occasion, he suddenly braked and caused her head to smash into the dashboard. Testimonies from Kristina's closest friends also provided crucial information about her relationship with Mark. Kristina had confided in one of her friends that after the birth of their children, her relationship with Mark had worsened. However, her friends were unaware of how serious the situation had become. The transition period after having children and the lifestyle changes that come with it can be challenging for couples, so they assumed it was simply a rough patch they were going through. They didn't realize that Mark was a ticking time bomb. The signs of strain in their relationship were misinterpreted, and it was impossible to predict that he would be capable of committing such a crime. Kristina had mentioned that Mark had become distant, closing himself off and becoming unreachable. They had even signed up for couples therapy in an attempt to repair their relationship. But Mark didn't take the session seriously. He would often leave early or not show up at all. Kristina also confided in a friend that Mark had started using substances like alcohol and others. She had caught him twice smoking weed in the basement. She also admitted that she was planning a divorce and had already consulted a lawyer about it. Her friend warned her to be especially cautious, given Mark's previous violent behavior and the fact that his family was very influential. There was a real threat that they might try to harm Kristina, for example, by using the children against her. At this point, it should also be mentioned that it appears Mark had an unhealthy relationship with his daughters. On his LinkedIn profile, he described himself as a proud father of 2 daughters. According to Kristina's friends, Mark had an obsession with appearances and having the perfect family, treating his daughters like a project. He was strict with them, controlled all their activities and outfits, and wanted them to be perfect, while his wife supposedly stood in the way of these unrealistic expectations. Kristina didn't often speak negatively about her husband, so the fact that in the year leading up to the murder she started opening up more about it indicated that the situation must have been really bad. Her friends blamed themselves for not helping her escape the abusive marriage before it was too late. They didn't realize that her confessions were cries for help. After Kristina's death, Mark was arrested. Her 2 young daughters have been placed under the care of Kristina's family. For the 4- and 3-year-old girls, the world they knew was turned upside down. They lost both parents, had to move, and couldn't understand what had happened. After the passing of their mother, the girls were under the supervision of child psychologists. On the day of Kristina's funeral, these psychologists explained to the children that their mother was sleeping and would not be returning. As they grow older, they will eventually learn the full truth about their mother's death, which will undoubtedly be a challenging reality for them to accept. The defense attorneys for Mark informed that they would seek to have him declared not guilty by reason of insanity. Under Swiss law, a sentence of just 3 years in prison is possible for unintentional manslaughter and up to 20 years for murder with premeditation. A serious concern in this case is also that Mark, being manipulative, could potentially influence the authorities and leave prison earlier based on good behavior. In September 2024, Mark submitted another request for release pending trial. However, the request was rejected, and so far, the trial date has not been set, and no verdict has been reached in the case. As of now, this is all that is known. That's the end of this story. Thank you for listening all the way through. If you like what I do, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you in advance, and see you next time. Goodbye.